Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing a review of the new film on HBO Max and in select theaters, Wonder Woman 1984. Now, before diving into the plethora of issues that I have with this movie, and some of the positives, and there are indeed a couple of positives somehow, some way, please be sure to smash the like button, smash the rumble button if you're watching over on Rumble, and of course, hit the subscribe button as well, and the bell notification if you want to be notified every time a new video goes live on the channel. So this is a movie that has gone through some craziness, obviously, as many films have in 2020. Many films were supposed to have released months ago, and because of, unfortunately, COVID-19 and all the lockdowns and studios being complete asshats, all these movies got pushed back, and they decided with HBO and Warner Brothers that they were going to keep Wonder Woman 1984 with the last of its being pushed back, which was to Christmas of 2020, saying we're going to keep it on Christmas, but this time what we're going to do is release it on HBO Max, so that way anyone that has an HBO Max subscription does not have to pay anything extra, but can access it right away. And I can tell you that the experience of watching it on HBO Max was actually pretty good. The transfer was pretty good for the most part. The quality was pretty high. Again, obviously it's not the same as watching it on the big screen, but it is something still at the very least where it worked. I remember that when HBO in general would have major episodes of Game of Thrones, back when Game of Thrones was really good, sometimes the servers wouldn't be able to hold the amount of traffic that was going on if you were watching it on the HBO app or HBO Now. And so it was really cool to see the fact that they were able to get this, because obviously they had a lot of traffic heading to this movie. So let's start off talking about a couple of the positive elements. Really, the only major casting choice that was a positive element that's not, of course, Gal Gadot, because let's just be honest, Gal Gadot's fantastic. I think she fits this role very well, and that's been very clear. The only other really good casting to this movie was Chris Pine. The fact that Chris Pine's character, and by the way, this is something that was in the trailer, so I don't consider that a spoiler, but there will be spoilers in this review because, I mean, at this point, I don't care if there's spoilers in this review because this movie is not worth your time. But Chris Pine was someone that I thought was worth the screen time that he had, because he's the only one that has any type of dynamism to his character. Him and Gal Gadot have great chemistry together, and so when they're on screen together, you're like, oh, I like this couple, I like these two people together, this is fantastic. And also I can say, as far as another positive is concerned, that when the stunts were being done by competent fighters, it looked pretty good, but unfortunately a lot of the stunt work used wires, which did not look that great. So normally I'm very positive when it comes to stunt works and stunt teams. It's obviously not their fault because they're just being told what to do. It's obviously the visionary or the vision behind the film that's going to impact what they do and how they perform and how they act. But with that being said, again, when there was fight sequences that utilized stunt people and stunt teams, for those that look pretty good, again, stunt teams usually do a pretty good job. One last thing I will say is that the cinematography looks okay, and the music by Hans Zimmer is fantastic. The music, I think, is actually really, really good, though they do randomly use scores from other films, including from one of the Batman movies. They use one of the Bruce Wayne score, I believe, at one point in the film, too. I didn't notice it right away, but it was mentioned last night on Friday Night Tights, and so that is, again, one of those things where, again, maybe that wasn't really his choice to do. Maybe it was the studio saying, we want to have this element in there because we like how it sounds, or it could have just been Hans Zimmer mixing things around. So that's pretty much the only positive stuff that I can really say about this movie, because this movie is a giant mess. This movie is probably one of the worst written comic stories that I've seen in a very long time. If I had to put this in order, or I had to put this rather with other films that are just as bad or even a little slightly better or worse, this would be Age of Ultron level. You know, from the Marvel side, this would be Age of Ultron level. For many people, they would even throw this in with a film like Thor: The Dark World as well, right? Where it just wasn't really well made, wasn't put together. But even with those two movies that I just mentioned, at least with The Dark World, I am biased towards it because it's the Thor franchise. At least those had some elements of entertainment to them. This movie was such a hot mess, was such a garbled mess of really bad CGI. You all know I'm a stickler for CGI. Even other people that have been more forgiving of other films and other TV shows recently with CGI, even they pointed out that they thought this CGI was crap, because it's not even just the effects themselves. It's how those effects are used. When you have people on wires, and you have the backgrounds look clearly like a green screen, and you're not trying to compensate to make it look more realistic, where they're launching at a point where you're like, that's not even a natural looking launch. You know, you should at least have the muscles and the legs moving in a certain way to make you believe that they're actually launching. Yes, obviously we have to suspend our disbelief to see them jump, 50 feet in the air, but there has to be something there other than it just looking like they're literally just being pulled off the ground, not using any muscles or any effort whatsoever. Like, that just looks bad. And from the very beginning, the opening sequence, there's so much bad wire work and so much bad CGI that it's so distracting. Not to mention, you look at that scene and you say, okay, this was all about trying to teach Diana about truth. And other than that, it was a completely worthless scene and just a way for them to get basically all of the Amazonians back onto the screen again, which for me, it was just not worth the time, especially when this movie is 2.5 hours long, which is probably an hour longer than it needed to be. Some people are saying, you could have cut off 30 minutes, made it 2 hours. But I think that there was honestly an hour's worth of just complete waste in this movie because the script is easily the worst part of this film. The script is convoluted. The script is just not making any sense. You can tell that there were different visions behind it. When you have 3 different writers on this script, as there were for this film, as you can see, the screenplay was by Patty Jenkins, Jeff Johns, and David Callahan. You can tell that they had different visions of what they wanted the tone of the film to be. The tonal of this film, it really is a tonal mess, right? They don't know what that kind of movie this wants to be. In the first film, it was much darker, right? It was much darker. It was still being heavily influenced by the Zack Snyder universe, whether you like that style or not. At the very least, it was consistent with the previous films that had come out, and it had its very clear tone. This one has no idea what it wants to be. At times, it tries to be brighter. It tries to be more campy. It tries to be more of a 70s camp play on the original series that came out during the 70s. But the problem, though, is that they're also still trying to hold on to some of those dark elements, though they're not fully embracing them. And so the whole time you're left with, man, this just feels uncomfortable. I don't know what you're trying to be. On top of that, add on to things like blatant continuity errors. There's one scene where literally the whole focus is on her letting go of the lasso of truth, and then as soon as she hits the ground, where is it? Wrapped around her little waist and hasn't moved. So literally, it's something so simple that even someone like me, typically I don't get to notice. I don't really notice continuity errors. But literally, she hits the ground, it's right there on her waist, and then she's walking away from the battle. Again, she has just let go of the lasso of truth because she's losing her powers, and sure enough, it's right there on her waist, hasn't moved one bit. That's lazy. That's lazy screenwriting. That's lazy continuity checking, and that's something that someone, I think, in basic film school should be able to figure out. And so I have to call out Patty Jenkins here. It's amazing to me that so many people are saying, Patty Jenkins, she's one of the hottest things right now in Hollywood. And all I have to say to that is she's done one big film until now. She did Wonder Woman, and it was okay. Like, it was okay at best. The effects weren't that great. The story was okay, but it was, hey, at least it was entertaining, right? At least there were elements. Gal Gadot, of course, stole the show. The action sequences were pretty good for the most part in that first film, and it was entertaining. Like, I could, that's a film that I can go back to and watch again. I own that movie, right? It's a film that I'd be okay coming back to in the future. This is a movie where I have no desire to ever watch this again because it's a complete and utter waste of time because they have no idea what they're doing. And obviously some people I think are going to try and say, well, it was obviously the studio's involvement. The studio tied their hands. But I had to ask the question, okay, but at what point does Patty Jenkins take any responsibility? We can't say that she's the biggest name in Hollywood and that she's an amazing director while at the same time giving excuses to her every time she makes a film that's not that great. Like, what elements can we really judge her by if anytime something bad happens from her films, we just blame the studio? You see how that just doesn't work? So I have a lot of concerns about her taking on her own Star Wars franchise, especially if it is true that the studio interfered with this movie. What's she going to do to stop Lucasfilm from doing the same thing, which is what the biggest problems has been so far in the new era of Star Wars movies, right? They've been terrible, not only because they've gotten crap directors like Rian Johnson, but also because the studios have gotten heavily involved and have done a terrible job in the process. So you have a terrible script, you have performances that for the most part are pretty good. Like, as I mentioned before, the standouts are definitely Gal Gadot and Chris Pine, but here's the thing. People might say, oh, you wanted to hate this movie and you're just looking for things to hate. I'm going to tell you something that I'm going to try and make it clear that my bias is not really impacting how I feel about this movie because I hate Kristen Wiig. I think she's one of the worst things to ever be put on the silver screen, and yet there are 2 movies that I don't mind her in. The first one, Secret Life of Walter Mitty, something that I don't know how he did it, but Ben Stiller was able to control her and make her a likable person. And the other film is Wonder Woman 1984. She's not great in the movie, but she's definitely not the worst thing in the film, and to be honest, I didn't mind her as much. It wasn't her fault that her character was so poorly written. You know, some people are going after her saying, like, oh man, it's all Kristen Wiig's fault, but if you step back for a second, she's performing it the best way she can, and all she can really go off of is the script she's given and the direction she's given. And so I don't think it's the performance that's the problem, it's the character and how it was written and how it was put together, and that goes on the director and the writer. So I'm a huge hater of Kristen Wiig, didn't mind her didn't mind her at all in this film. Then you might say, oh yeah, you just hate it because Pedro Pascal's in the film. I've gone on record to say I think Pedro Pascal is a talented actor, and guess what? That shows in this film. You might also say, oh, well, it's because you thought that there was going to be Trump references in there. That's the thing. This film does not really have those many overt references to Trump. Like, that was one of the things that I noticed in the Collider review, right? The shills over at Collider, they were like, oh, the Trumpism, Trumpism, Trumpism. And I'm like, if you want to find it, you can find it, right? If you're looking for something, if you're looking for anything like that, then yeah, you're going to find those elements. You're going to find those things. But as far as it being blatantly on the face, on the surface, it really isn't quite there, right? I mean, at one point, a wall is built, but you have to really get a convoluted, path to get to the point of, oh, wall, Trump, because it's a Saudi prince that wishes for this wall to be built, and so therefore there really is no direct correlation to be made at that point. You will then also, I mean, maybe not a Saudi prince, but a Middle Eastern prince or king or whatever was, trying to do this. And so really, again, there's no connection to be made there. The other connection some might say is, oh, but this Maxwell Lord, he is a TV celebrity / businessman. But guess what? There's a lot of different people that have been TV personalities and businessmen, and they did go on record to say Trump was one of the many influences to this character. So again, if you want to find those references, you can find them if you really look hard enough, but it's really not over the head. It doesn't hit you over the head. At least at that point with those moments. Where it does hit you over the head is in the very clear hatred that this film has for men. Because most of the men in the movie are portrayed as misogynist. Most of the men in this film are portrayed as just women hungry. And the fact that you have Wonder Woman losing her powers, losing her abilities, all because she's in love with a man, and it's not until she gives up that man, gives up the relationship, that all of a sudden the weights and the shackles of everything are lifted off of her, and she can be fully powerful. It reminds me very much so of Mulan. Where in Mulan, in the live-action version, what happens? She has her father's armor on, and how does she become free and becomes this badass? She sheds away the armor of her father, throwing away this ancient armor, by the way, in the process, and somehow is able to beat all of these different soldiers, all without any armor on whatsoever, except, of course, for plot armor. That's exactly what happens in this movie, too, where she gets her powers back after she sheds away the relationship that she had with Chris Pine's character. And so all of these different things are so convoluted. You have to have the end scene where you have almost an Edward Nygma, and I know a lot of people have been saying that, this Edward Nygma approach where there's this giant blue beam. It's not a giant sky beam, right? This is one of the few times it's not a sky beam, but it's still a giant beam of light, and essentially what he's doing, what Pedro Pascal's character is doing, is he's sucking up the energy and the life force of all these people because he's sick and he's trying to feel better. Yes. And what is this movie about? It's about truth. It's about men are bad, men are evil, and it's about women are powerful when they're on their own. That's the core messaging that I got from this movie. Now, I will point out that it does not hit you over the head necessarily with those messages. But when you look at what's being presented on screen, when you look at what's being presented in the writing, and you look at the fact that this is just not a well-written script, all you're left with then is the ability where you have to look for something. Right? If you can't look at the screen and be entertained, if you can't look for the characters and be entertained, all then that you're left with is to say, oh, I guess I got to find something to hold on to. I got to find something to look into. And that's why you do have people that are being drawn more towards things looking for Trumpisms. You do have more people like myself saying, whoa, wow, yeah, there's a lot of really crappy men in this movie. And oh, wait a minute. Did she just give up her relationship and that's how she got her powers back? Also, what the hell is this wishing stone? I'm going to wish for it and now I'm going to renounce my wish. If only we could renounce wishes, that would get away and get rid of all the crap that's happened with COVID and everything like that. If only that's how things worked. It makes no sense. The script's convoluted. The characters, the actors are fine, but the characters suck. I think that's another way of putting it, is that the actual acting is not bad at all, but the writing, the character development, the direction, that is complete crap. So again, anyone that says Patty Jenkins is a great filmmaker, I'm sorry, but there's nothing to prove that to this point, because she's had one mediocre film. I mean, the best you can say about the first Wonder Woman was that it was mediocre at best. Everyone, I think, agrees universally that her appearances in the Batman movies was the best version of the character thus far. And that in the movie, even in her own movie, it did not really live up to the hype. Right? There are moments that are really badass, especially I would say during the war in the first Wonder Woman, right? When she's going onto the battlefield and she's, knocking off the bullets. Those scenes are really, really cool and really badass. But I think that most people would agree that there really isn't a whole lot of there in the two solo films that she's had. Now, I think that someone has gone on the record to say that Patty Jenkins did not plan for this film, did not want to make this film necessarily because there was no story. And it's very clear that they just cobbled together this random story, threw in random references to, oh, by the way, I have the power to make my jet invisible because of one random thing I heard about in the histories of our people. because obviously our island was invisible. I was able to make one cup of coffee invisible and lost it, and now all of a sudden, because of my willpower, I can turn this entire jet into the invisible jet. So you have references like that. There's this mid-credit scene that you have as well, where you have the original Wonder Woman herself coming back, and she's this warrior that many people thought had died, but she's been alive. So now she's officially a part of this universe as not being Wonder Woman, but as definitely being another powerful Amazonian character, and so they can basically bring her back if they really want to at this point. But at this point, I really hope they don't make any more Wonder Woman films, because until they get rid of Patty Jenkins and get a more competent director who can actually fight against studio interference, if that is indeed the reason why the film sucks, then they need to have that kind of a person. And, Patty Jenkins is just going to keep on doing the same thing over and over again and allowing the studio to run her over. I'm sorry, that's not a good director. That's not a strong director. And it's not a director that people need to keep on making excuses for. And I'm not even mentioning the cheetah CGI. Dear Lord. You thought it was bad in the trailer. It's just as bad in the film. They didn't fix it. They didn't go back and make it look any better. And dear Lord, it's just, again, Kristen Wiig wasn't the problem. I cannot imagine believe that I'm saying that. Kristen Wiig is not the problem in this movie. So if I had to give this film a grade, I'm gonna give this film a D+. And, I was kind of thinking it was like maybe in the C range, but this really is a D-level film. It's long, it's bloated, it's poorly written, it's poorly directed. There really is nothing good to be said about it except for the score by Hans Zimmer, because he could literally fart in his sleep and it would be a better score than a lot of the stuff that we have nowadays. And the performances by Gal Gadot and Chris Pine, but that is not enough to carry a movie. And some people have been saying, oh, well, the last part's great. The last part is terrible. Every part of this film is complete and utter garbage. It's a waste of time. I've heard so many people, including my wife, say, man, that's 2.5 hours that I will never get back, and I wish that I could get back. And she's not nearly as sensitive to a lot of these issues as I am. And to me, if she doesn't like a film, if she thinks a film is bad, especially a film like this, that she would be more apt to like, that tells me that this film has a lot of objective problems and issues. And so you can go ahead and complain in the comments saying, oh, you're biased and you're just a misogynist, etc. But I'm pointing out just facts. I'm pointing out objective flaws with this film. Writing issues, those are objective flaws. When you have the story not making sense and being convoluted, right? You can subjectively say, I don't mind that at all. It's fine. But you can't just change the objective reality of it not being well put together. So anyway, I'm going to give this film a D+. For the only reason that I'm going to give always kudos to, especially those behind-the-scenes people like Hans Zimmer, like the stunt team, like the people who are, handling all of the tech stuff, because they're just doing what they're told. And so it's the people at the top, it's the producers. In this case, Gal Gadot was actually a producer. Patty Jenkins was a producer. The Snyders were producers as well. So some people have been saying, oh, well, Zack Snyder had nothing to do with this film. He's still listed as a main producer. And producers, if they're listed as a main producer, meaning let's say this film got nominated for an Oscar, that means that he would be someone that would win an Oscar because of that. That's how much power he has in this specific film. And so for anyone saying he had no involvement with it whatsoever, I don't know if he had a lot of involvement, but you can't say he had nothing to do with it because his name is listed. He is a producer. He put money behind this film, and that means he also had some creative input as well. And so again, it's not all on him, but it's a shared bit of blame all around. But obviously, director has to be the one that takes the brunt of it. And so Patty Jenkins, I hope that her film gets canceled for Star Wars. And if their only criteria is we want to have a female director for Star Wars, I'm sorry, but Catherine Bigelow has been doing action films for such a longer time and a such better way. I can't think of a bad Catherine Bigelow film. I mean, she's done great films like Point Break. She's done Zero Dark 30, The Hurt Locker, right? All really great films dealing with action-heavy sequences. My only guess is that they've asked her and she said no, because she says, screw you, you're going to interfere and not let me do what I want to do. And Patty Jenkins, I think, if she wants to have any future at all in being loved by fans especially, she needs to start really having her own voice and saying, screw you, if the studios are indeed involved, which I don't even know if they are in the first place. But anyway, what are your thoughts about this? Have you seen this movie? It is available on HBO Max and in theaters. If you haven't, I honestly can't recommend it. I enjoy Avatar more than this movie. And you all know how much I hate that movie. It is always considered one of my worst films, one of my least liked films in Avatar. This has now beaten it. That is how bad this movie is on just an objective level. Subjectively, I hated it. Objectively, I hated it. There's really almost no redeeming quality that this film has at all. Not to mention the really cool posters, the color that's in those posters, not really at all existing in the movie at all. And I think that's a problem too, because that could have made it pop. That could have made it more interesting, but it would have had the writing issues still nonetheless. But let me know your thoughts about this in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash that like button, hit that subscribe. It helps a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Smash the Rumble if you're watching over on Rumble. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Hope you all had a Merry Christmas as well. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my December Patreon and Subscribe Star members, starting off with Patreon Albertus Magnus, Andrew Hoyle, Animation Commentator Brian P., Dion, Divex, Enrique Evangelista, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Harold Francis, The Hunky Chunky Funky Monkey, Inflamed Wood, It's a Trap Productions, Jason Clark, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toon, Jonathan Carney, Kenneth Camille, Laura Story, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mike Jackson, Mr. Peabody and his evil twin with the beautiful hair, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Outpost Dyer, Riff Magos, Rosetta Allen, Steve Glasker, Miss Martin Muses, also known as Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bogend, Tina B, and the Modern Major General, Laura Story. Gotta give you that shout out for that one time that you were doubled up. Thank you very much for being my Patreon members. And now a huge shout out to all of my December Subscribe Star members we have over there with Stand For, Perpetual Punster, Robert Revo, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, Darkstar 57, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., US 888209 Fast, Dean Heiss, J-Rod the Beer Guru, Nevadan G. Adams, and ZK Man. Thank you all so much for being my Patreon and Subscribe Star members. If you want your name shouted out at the end of every video and live stream on the main channel, please consider joining over on those platforms. You can also get access to things like exclusive giveaways of 4Ks, Blu-rays. If you want a DVD, I guess you could also get a DVD as well, digital codes, and of course, you get to possibly join me on the channel once a month for the Chosen of Valhalla live stream and access to an exclusive podcast featuring John the Flick Pick Flickinger, where we have a lot of fun talking about movies and tons of other random things. Anyway, if you want to support these things, check out the links in the description of this video. And also, please consider joining my other channel, the OMB Report, where I talk about not just movies like I do over here, but I focus more so on politics, news, and culture in that order. You guys are all amazing. Thank you for your love and support. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless.